Alright, so I was told by a viewer that Loctite 262, or this Threadlocker, the red one, is meant to be permanent. It says here high strength fasteners to 3/4 inch or 3/4 inch. I haven't had any issues with this stuff getting stuck, so I'm not sure. They were saying that instead you can use fingernail polish varnish or something to lock the top of the thread instead, or the top of the screw, I guess, into place. So that was what they were telling me to use instead. I mean, that's a good idea as well, because that kind of thing, it doesn't constantly grip. It's more like when you have to take it out, it'll just crack the varnish and it will come off. But anyways, we're going to use this, and I'm doing this how I would normally do it. So the computers, they're already going to have a little bit of stuff on there, as you can see. So if anything, that kind of helps release it as well. But as you can see, the blue, they only put on one side there. If I rotate this, it's not on the entire screw. So anyways, I'm going to bolt it all the way to the top. So here you can see at the top, at the top, there's no blue up there. So we're going to put the Threadlocker all the way up there, just to make sure that it's not just because the blue contaminated part. Okay, let's get a little bit on there. So we're gonna get it all on there. So here you can see we got the red stuff all the way down. Hopefully you can see. Okay, I'm gonna have to use something to hold this, the bolt, or whatever you call this, the nut. Okay, so we're gonna put this in, and let's go ahead and tighten this. Right now I can hold this by hand, as you can see. As it gets to the blue part, it gets tough because of course that's hardened. I am going to have to use some pliers or something to hold this piece so that I can tighten it all the way. And then we're gonna let this sit. I'm gonna let it sit for a couple days. I forgot what the longest time. I'm gonna double check what the longest cure time is, depending on the materials that it comes in contact with. And then I'm gonna take it from there, and we'll let it sit for that long. Okay, so here you can see I put a lot. You can even see that the red stuff is oozing out, so there's no chance that it's like not enough, that it's gonna be easy. So here we go. Okay, so I'm gonna let this sit overnight, at least 24 hours. I'm gonna actually check. I forgot there's one that takes quite a long time to completely set. So I'm going to leave it however long that takes, plus a few extra hours, just to see. All right, so here you can see it's going over the edges now. And yeah, all right, so I'll let this sit, and we'll see you all later once it's been cured enough. All right, see you later. All right, so it's been about 30 hours now, so we're going to see about separating this. So again, I put the red Threadlocker, Loctite Threadlocker 262. All right, I was told that this is meant to be permanent, so it's going to be very difficult to remove. We'll see. As you can see, I put so much that it's actually even overflowing out here. Okay, so let's see. And I'm going to try and at first make it easy to not come out. So, oops, what I'm doing is I'm holding it on the smooth side of this with these needle nose pliers. So if it can come out here, then it shouldn't be too bad. So right now I'm just holding it on the smooth part here. Okay, and then I'm gonna try and remove this. If I need to, then I'm gonna grab on the more threaded, or whatever, the rough side there. So let's see here. Okay, I'm holding it with this. So here you can see it won't come out like that. So let's go ahead now and grab the more rough side. Okay, and as you can see, it's twisting out very easily. Okay, I mean, it's not super easy. Like if I just use 2 fingers here, it's pretty tough, so I can't do that. But if I use my whole hand to twist the screwdriver, then I could easily get this back out. All right, so the red stuff, as you can see, it's all just coming out. You can see it's getting all turning to powder and shredding up. Okay, and then you can see the blue. The blue is like very loose. As you can see, I'm actually just using 2 fingers for that, and that's very easy. But the red stuff, I had to kind of use my whole hand. But here you can see, okay, as you can see, it kind of just shredded it all off. Okay, And yeah, so it does make it a lot harder. As you can see, if I put this back in, it should be very easy to do. I'm just using 2 fingers right now. Okay, we're getting to the red part, but I can still use 2 fingers. But initially when I go to remove it, I did have to use my whole hand. But now look, I can just use my 2 fingers and it comes out just fine. So this red stuff, it holds pretty well. I use this mainly just for the hinge screws, because a lot of times the hinge, when it's constantly like opening and closing, that prying force, it rocks the screw slightly side to side like this, and over time that loosens the screw and it will slowly twist its way out. And then once you get a loose fit, so you can kind of imagine it like, okay, let's say if I'm holding the screwdriver here, okay? So if I'm holding it like this and I try and rotate it, it's very tough. But if I open this gap and now I do it, it's like, it's basically prying my thumb off. So what happens when the screw comes loose, the hinge is no longer holding tightly like this. It's more open like that, and then it's basically allowing the screw to do this. And on top of that, since it's not like a smooth motion, what it is, like, you see how like there's this gap here? So what happens is it suddenly like pries it out. And that sudden motion is what causes the hinge, it's not really the hinge mechanism that breaks. It's very rare that the hinge itself will break. It's usually the mount that these little brass pieces go into. So usually what they do is these, I don't know if you would call these threads, but they're designed so that when they screw this thing in, these brass pieces will actually screw down into the plastic mount. So they have a plastic mount like this, and then when it tightens around it, it will basically drill itself into the plastic. And then when it has a tight fit, it's okay. It's kind of as if I was just holding this tight and you open and like undo these screws. But again, when the hinge comes loose, then it no longer becomes like a smooth, like moving like this. Then it becomes like a gap, and then it like pries it out. And what happens is the plastic here isn't strong enough to handle that, and the plastic cracks. Once the plastic cracks, then this whole brass piece just comes out of there and those hinges break. So I throw away a lot of these little brass pieces, but let me show you how many I save. I save some of them sometimes. I never use them for anything, but here you can see all these brass things that you see here. They all came from broken hinges. So that's a crap ton of broken hinges, okay? And it's not really the user's fault, it's the design. Apple knows this, so they actually have the least problems, because Apple's design, instead of having plastic around those brass rivets, the screw just goes straight into solid aluminum. So even when the screws come loose, because it's solid aluminum, it's much stronger and there's a lot less risk of it breaking. I've only seen 1 or 2 hinges, like the screw mounts for the Macs break. And usually it's because somebody like tripped on their screen and it like just shoved it over. But yeah, on almost every other laptop where it's like plastic on the outside, they have plastic just around those brass mounts, and then the plastic cracks from the prying force and it breaks. And again, it usually happens because the screws come loose, and then when the screws come loose, instead of like a smooth motion, it's more like a sudden like prying force. Kind of like how when you have nails in a piece of wood and then you get the back of the hammer, you need to suddenly like yank on it. You don't want to just like keep slowly pulling, you're not going to get the nail out. So that little gap where the screw slowly loosens itself is enough to that when your screen gets that wobbliness to it, and it's not like a smooth like opening, when your screen becomes like wobbly like that, that means your screws are loose and it's basically like suddenly prying. You can keep using it like that, but you want to slowly open your screen and slowly close your screen, at least for that wobbly part, because the wobbly part is what causes the sudden like yanking motion. Okay, So again, this red thread locker stuff, even since new, I mean, I've used this on so many computers and I've never had any issues with the screws not coming out. The only time you have issues is if the plastic is already slightly broken, the plastic that wraps around the brass. And then because it holds tighter, then you could end up possibly pulling the brass piece out from the plastic and completely like finishing the broken plastic off. But other than that, it doesn't hold tight enough to make it permanent. The Loctite is designed to be a more like permanent solution, but usually it's for bigger screws and bolts, not like these tiny little threads where barely any of the Threadlocker Loctite stuff can get in there. But anyways, that's my video on the red Threadlocker to show that it's not completely difficult to remove. They did give another option to use like fingernail varnish or something, or I guess like fingernail polish to put basically underneath this piece, so that way it kind of just sticks. Because fingernail polish is somewhat brittle, it'll hold, and then when you go to undo it, it'll just crack the fingernail polish and then you can take the screw out. But again, sometimes the sudden jerk motion is enough to crack that polish, so I don't really like that. Threadlocker kind of gives a little, so it's kind of like if you think of like rubber, so it has like a slight like flex to it. So even if the thing kind of like turns it a tiny bit, a little, or vibration, it can like basically pull itself back because of that rubbery texture or plasticky texture. If it's something where it's very brittle, then basically if the vibration is enough, it can actually crack it, and then that seal will no longer hold, and then the screw will just come out anyways. I've seen a lot of manufacturers, as you can see, these screws already have some blue Threadlocker on it. The blue Threadlocker I find isn't strong enough and it comes out. So yeah, I've been working on this a lot. And then Apple, like I mentioned earlier, they know about this. So on a lot of their laptops, if you've seen my videos, they'll put little rubber covers with adhesive on top. And again, adhesive isn't like brittle, like it has that gummy texture where it's slightly rubbery, and that basically is to prevent the screws from turning themselves out. So if there's some sudden shock, it'll like maybe turn a tiny bit, but it'll go back because of the rubberiness of the adhesive. And then on the newer Macs, they even now put like a plastic cover over the hinge screws, and then they screw that plastic hinge cover into place. So that way the sudden vibration from opening and closing the screen will cause the screw to kind of just hit that plastic cover, and then it can't really turn itself further than that. But yeah, that's my video on using the red Threadlocker stuff on computers. You don't want to use it on all the bottom case screws. If you're gonna use Threadlocker on the case screws, you want to use the blue stuff just because it's easier to get out and you have no reason to put the red one. And you don't want to risk putting a very strong Threadlocker when those screws, if you drop your laptop and crack it, then those screw mounts might pop out, and then it's going to be very hard to take those out. So use the blue stuff for the body and then the red stuff just for the hinges, just because the hinges have to handle a bunch more stress and shock. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this video helped you guys understand why I use the red Threadlocker, and I'll see you all in the next one. All right, let's drop this. Bye.